serious? Soldiers of Reddit who fought in Afghanistan, what preconceptions did you have that turned out to be completely wrong? That Afghanistan was an actual country. It's only so on a map. The people, in some of the more rural places, at least, have no concept of Afghanistan. We were in a village in northern Kandahar province, talking to some people who of course had no idea who we were or why we were there. This was in 2004. Not only had they not heard about 9/11, they hadn't heard Americans had come over. Talking to them further, they hadn't heard about that one time the Russians were in Afghanistan either. We then asked if they knew where the city of Kandahar was, which is a rather large and important city some 30 miles to the south. They'd heard of it, but no one had ever been there, and they didn't know when it was. For them, there was no Afghanistan. The concept just didn't exist. Oh. Also about the fighting we did. I had in my mind that it would be these organized ambushes against a somewhat organized force. It may have been like that for the push, Marja. But once the initial defense was scattered, the fighting turned into some farmer getting paid a year's salary to go fire an AK-47 at our patrol as we walked by. I mean, no wonder there was so much PTSD going around. It doesn't feel okay when you killed some farmer for trying to feed his kids or save his family from torture that next night. It feels like it actually. That they had any idea why we were there. We'd ask them if they knew what 9/11 was, and they had no idea. We'd show them pictures of the WTC on fire after the planes hit, and ask them what it was. Their response was usually that it was a picture of a building the US bombed in Kabul, their capital. Kind of mind-blowing that they are being occupied by a foreign military force and have no idea why. That we would be fighting the Taliban. The majority of people we managed to detain had been coerced into shooting at us by the Mujahideen, which is made up of all sorts of people who had kidnapped or threatened their family. The most glaring example of this was when our free on board, forward operating base was attacked by a massive VBIED truck bomb that blew a hole in our wall. Suicide bombers ran into the free on board through the hole and blew themselves up in our bunkers. Every single one of them had their hands tied and remote detonation receivers, so they couldn't back out. Edit. Thanks for the gold. Their concept of food. In their culture, if anyone had food, they were to share it with everyone around them. This is even if you only have enough for one person to have a snack. It was almost as if they didn't believe food could be owned by a person. Some of the Afghans I worked with would be offended if I ate anything and didn't offer them some. I guess also that I would actually be working with some Afghans. I didn't expect that to be a thing. Edit. Yay. My first gold. Soldiers tend to train for fighting at sub 500 meters. At least I always had. Not being able to see the enemy wasn't completely out of the norm for training, but they were usually within the effective range of our small arms. Come to Afghanistan and we were getting fired at by invisible enemies on the side of mountains a kilometer plus away. We hardly knew we were getting engaged, let alone went into contact drills. They told us we were going to fight the Taliban. Turns out, there is no way to know who is Taliban, or what Taliban is, or what they look like. A guy will be bringing his kid to your clinic one day, then shooting at you the next. You'll make friends with a kid on an airdrop, then see that kid slit another kid's throat on patrol a week later. There is no enemy and no goal. The people don't even understand who you are or why you're there. Many of them believed we were invulnerable demons. One elder tested this theory by sending a small child to try and stab me in the back with a knife, which was made by welding a blade onto an old .50 calorie casing. Kids dug up mines, bouncing Bettys, and old Russian munitions and set them off like firecrackers. The place is a ducked up maelstrom with no conceivable sense of morality, justice, benevolence, or community. Every single person is just trying to survive. When I was told I was going to Afghanistan, I was picturing mountains and all that stuff they have in the eastern part of the country. I went to southern Afghanistan. It's mostly desert. But around the rivers it's a ducking jungle. I spent many patrols wading through knee to waist deep water and mud in pomegranate and grape orchards. Most of my training leading up to deploying to Afghanistan had been geared towards urban operations and convoy operations. What I ended up doing was small, squad-sized dismounted patrols through rough terrain. Also didn't expect to be as close to the enemy as we usually were. Usually less than 50 meters was our engagement distance. That it was really a war. It's just people sustaining other people, with a lot of nothing actually getting done. As someone who was a gunner for most of my tour, we mainly did transportation missions from Kabul to the eastern province. We never saw any action. And to this day I thank God for that. The fact that a lot of my time outside of convoys was spent either sleeping, eating, or gaming surprised me, I suppose. But in the end, we're just there to provide presents, and not expected to actually accomplish anything. The amount of awards given out back in Kabul for people simply hitting a high quota of maintenance repairs threw me off too. There were times when I was looked down upon for not working every day in a shop and instead being on convoys. The worst part of it all was losing a friend to suicide after returning home safe. That was something I never expected to see happen, and it still messes with me to this day. Edit, I'm at work so replies will be slower. Edit 2, still at work. But thanks for the gold. I appreciate everyone hearing my story. Was in the Tangi Valley and we had 2 of our 4 of HMMWVS broke in the middle of a town. The whole village male population came out to help us dig out our vehicles. Talking like 100-200 people who were digging, and it right next to us and with us. Sun went down and it started to snow. Everyone left. We got attacked that night. The villagers didn't want us there. Not because they hated us, but because they knew their mud huts were about to get tucked up in the attack that would happen that night. Christmas Eve. I think 2010. My perception that was completely wrong is that all the locals hate you and they want to try and kill you 24/7. As I stated, that is completely wrong, and it was the opposite of that. The local Afghan population, and ironically the Taliban, were extremely nice to us. They would rather have us there than the Taliban. Where I was stationed was the heroin capital of Afghanistan. I actually believe in the world as well. We were also told that the majority of the Taliban were from this area as well. Because of this, a lot of them didn't want to fight in their own backyards. The locals were happy with us because we kept the peace and helped them out as much as we can in a combat environment. We actually brought an economic boost for them as well. The local shop owners loved us because we would always buy monsters, pop, cigarettes, and chips off of them. We would buy food off of other locals on a weekly basis. Oh yeah, that's another perception I had that was wrong. Those duckers can cook. And I mean cook. They had the best chicken and potatoes and made the best bread. As I stated already, the Taliban soldiers didn't have a problem with us either. There are many times we would hear that the higher up Taliban leaders would call the local guys and flip the duck out on them because they aren't trying to kill us, and the local dudes would just be like, hey man, we're good. They are good. They aren't doing anything to harm us. We just want to chill. They will be gone sooner or later. I'm not hitting you. That's how their conversations went. There would even be times that the Taliban were forced to do their job that they would have other local people place the IEDs and make them so ducking obvious. Like textbook IED laying so we can see it from a mile away so none of us would get hurt and they can pass it on and say they did their job. This was great to write. Thank you for asking. It's pretty rare that someone asks you anything about being in Afghanistan other than did you kill anyone. It's nice to talk about it. Edit. Thank you to whoever gifted me gold. You hear so much about how different Afghans and Afghani culture is before you go that you forget that they're just people too. The kids especially. Kids everywhere are pretty much the same. I don't feel too bad about leaving the itty lazy AMF guys to their fate. But I still wonder about the little kids I used to watch play from our guard tower. I thought there would be some Muslims in Afghanistan that would actually be on our side. Turns out I was deaf wrong. 100% of the Pajoy district was Taliban. You were either a child of a Taliban father or a wife to one. We even captured some kids once after we got ambushed. They had ditched their weapons. But they were deaf, the ones shooting at us. Killed a couple. Captured the rest. Age like 13-19ish. I knew there were IEDs. But it's stupid just how many there are. Within our first 2 months in country we had recovered and disposed of 69 of them. I had heard the kids were funny. I honestly hated the majority of them. They threw rocks and shot slingshots at us and would never leave us alone.